Sarah Martinez had always been different from the other girls at Jefferson High School. While her classmates spent their afternoons at the mall or gossiping about boys, Sarah could be found in the basement of her family's modest home, surrounded by military history books and strategy guides. Her father, a retired Marine sergeant, had filled her childhood with stories of courage, discipline, and honor. What he hadn't prepared her for was how cruel teenagers could be when someone didn't fit their narrow definition of normal. The locker room at Jefferson High was a battlefield of its own kind. Every day after physical education class, Sarah would quietly change her clothes while enduring the whispered comments and barely concealed laughter from her classmates. Jennifer Walsh, the captain of the cheerleading squad, seemed to take particular pleasure in making Sarah's life miserable. "Look at Martinez over there," Jennifer would say loud enough for everyone to hear. "I bet she thinks she's some kind of soldier or something. Did you see how seriously she took that rope climbing exercise? It's just gym class, not boot camp." The other girls would giggle and nod along, eager to stay in Jennifer's good graces. Sarah had learned long ago that defending herself only made things worse. Instead, she would focus on getting dressed quickly and escaping to her next class, where she could lose herself in mathematics or literature. What her tormentors didn't know was that Sarah had been attending weekend training sessions with the local Army Reserve unit since her 16th birthday. Her father had connections from his military days, and when Sarah expressed serious interest in pursuing a military career, he helped her get involved in a youth mentorship program. Every Saturday morning, she would drive to the reserve base 40 minutes outside of town, where she trained alongside actual soldiers. Captain Rodriguez, a seasoned infantry officer, had taken Sarah under his wing. He saw something special in the quiet teenager who approached every challenge with determination and never complained, no matter how difficult the training became. While her high school classmates were sleeping in on weekends, Sarah was learning marksmanship, tactical communications, and leadership principles that would serve her well in the years to come. The contrast between her two worlds couldn't have been starker. At school, she was the weird girl who didn't fit in, who dressed practically instead of fashionably, who preferred reading military biographies to celebrity magazines. At the reserve base, she was a promising young recruit who showed natural leadership abilities and earned the respect of seasoned soldiers twice her age. One particularly difficult Tuesday, Jennifer had outdone herself in the locker room. She had convinced several other girls to hide Sarah's regular clothes while she was in the shower, leaving her with only her sweaty gym clothes to wear to her next class. As Sarah searched frantically for her missing items, the laughter grew louder and more cruel. "Maybe she can just wear her imaginary military uniform," Jennifer suggested with false sweetness. "I'm sure it would look better than whatever weird clothes she usually wears anyway." Sarah found her clothes eventually, stuffed behind a row of lockers and deliberately wrinkled. She dressed in silence while the other girls continued their commentary, each word cutting deeper than the last. That afternoon, she sat in her car in the school parking lot for nearly 20 minutes, fighting back tears and questioning whether she should just give up and try to fit in like everyone else wanted her to. But that evening, as she reviewed her weekend training notes and prepared for an upcoming leadership exercise, Sarah remembered something Captain Rodriguez had told her during a particularly challenging obstacle course session. He had said that true strength isn't measured by how popular you are or how easy your life becomes, but by how you respond when everything seems to be working against you. Sarah's mother, Elena Martinez, had immigrated to the United States from El Salvador when she was just 18 years old. She had worked 2 jobs to put herself through nursing school while learning English and adapting to a completely new culture. Elena had taught her daughter that being different wasn't something to be ashamed of, but rather a source of strength that would serve her well throughout life. Her father, Sergeant Martinez, had his own lessons to share. He had grown up in a rough neighborhood where joining the military had literally saved his life, giving him direction, purpose, and a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. He recognized that same hunger in his daughter, that desire to be part of something larger than herself. The family's evening conversations often revolved around current events and military strategy. While other teenagers were discussing television shows or social media drama, Sarah was learning about geopolitical conflicts, military history, and the qualities that separated great leaders from merely adequate ones. Her parents treated her opinions with respect and encouraged her to think critically about complex issues. At the reserve base, Sarah had found the sense of belonging that eluded her at high school. The other members of the youth program came from diverse backgrounds, but they shared a common commitment to service and self-improvement. Here, her dedication was seen as an asset rather than something to be mocked. Her attention to detail, her willingness to help others, and her natural ability to remain calm under pressure were all qualities that her instructors valued highly. The training exercises were becoming increasingly sophisticated as Sarah and her fellow participants demonstrated their growing competence. They had progressed from basic physical fitness and military customs to more advanced topics like small unit tactics and crisis management. Sarah excelled in scenarios that required quick thinking and clear communication under stress. One weekend exercise had particularly impressed Captain Rodriguez. The participants had been divided into teams and given a complex logistics problem to solve within a limited time frame. While other team leaders had struggled with indecision or tried to dominate their teammates, Sarah had listened carefully to everyone's input, identified the most practical solution, and implemented it efficiently. Her team had completed the exercise 40 minutes ahead of schedule while maintaining the highest accuracy standards. These experiences were building Sarah's confidence in ways that her high school environment never could. She was beginning to understand that the qualities that made her an outsider among her teenage peers were the same qualities that would make her an effective leader in the military. Her seriousness, her commitment to excellence, and her ability to see beyond immediate social pressures were all attributes that would serve her well in her chosen career path. As her senior year progressed, Sarah had to make increasingly concrete decisions about her future. She had been accepted to several universities with strong ROTC programs, but she was also considering enlisting directly after graduation. Her parents supported whatever decision she made, knowing that their daughter had the maturity and determination to succeed in whatever path she chose. The locker room incidents continued, but they began to affect Sarah less deeply as she gained perspective on what really mattered in life. She realized that Jennifer and her followers were operating from a place of insecurity, trying to build themselves up by tearing others down. Sarah's growing confidence and sense of purpose made her less vulnerable to their attacks. 5 years had passed since Sarah Martinez graduated from Jefferson High School, and her transformation had been nothing short of remarkable. The shy teenager who had endured daily humiliation in the locker room had evolved into Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, United States Army, fresh from completing her officer training at West Point Military Academy. Her dedication, intelligence, and natural leadership abilities had not only earned her a commission, but also positioned her for rapid advancement within the military hierarchy. The journey to this point had been challenging in ways that her high school tormentors could never have imagined. West Point demanded everything from its cadets: physical excellence, academic achievement, moral integrity, and the ability to lead others under the most demanding circumstances. Sarah had thrived in this environment, finding herself surrounded by peers who shared her commitment to service and excellence. During her 4 years at the academy, Sarah had specialized in military intelligence and communications. She had graduated in the top 10% of her class, earned recognition for her leadership during summer training exercises, and caught the attention of senior officers who saw in her the potential for significant future contributions to the Army. Her combination of analytical skills, tactical awareness, and ability to remain calm under pressure made her exactly the kind of officer the modern military needed. Now, as a newly commissioned second lieutenant, Sarah had been assigned to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home of the 101st Airborne Division. Her first assignment was as a platoon leader in an intelligence unit, responsible for 35 soldiers ranging in age from 18 to 45. The responsibility was immense, but Sarah approached it with the same methodical preparation that had served her well throughout her military training. Fort Campbell was a sprawling installation that housed thousands of soldiers and their families. The base buzzed with constant activity as units prepared for deployments, conducted training exercises, and maintained the high state of readiness that defined airborne forces. For Sarah, walking across the base each morning was a reminder of how far she had traveled from the narrow halls of Jefferson High School. Her platoon consisted of soldiers from diverse backgrounds: inner-city kids looking for opportunity and structure, college graduates seeking adventure and purpose, career military personnel working toward retirement, and immigrants pursuing citizenship through service. What united them was their commitment to the mission and their respect for competent leadership, regardless of where that leadership came from. Staff Sergeant William Thompson, Sarah's platoon sergeant, was a 15-year veteran who had deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times. He had initially been skeptical about working under such a young officer, but Sarah's preparation, willingness to learn from his experience, and genuine concern for the welfare of their soldiers had quickly won his respect. Thompson became not just a subordinate, but a valuable mentor who helped Sarah navigate the complex dynamics of military leadership. The intelligence work that Sarah's unit performed was both fascinating and demanding. They analyzed satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and prepared briefings for senior commanders planning military operations. The work required attention to detail, analytical thinking, and the ability to see patterns that others might miss. Sarah's academic background and natural aptitude for strategic thinking made her exceptionally well-suited for this role. 6 months into her assignment, Sarah received news that would test everything she had learned about leadership and resilience. Her unit was being deployed to Afghanistan as part of a larger operation aimed at disrupting terrorist networks in the region. This would be Sarah's first combat deployment, and the responsibility for her soldiers' safety and mission success weighed heavily on her shoulders. The preparation for deployment was intensive and comprehensive. Sarah spent countless hours studying the terrain, culture, and political situation in their assigned area of operations. She worked closely with intelligence analysts to understand the specific threats they would face and the resources available to counter them. Most importantly, she focused on ensuring that every soldier in her platoon was as prepared as possible for the challenges ahead. During pre-deployment training exercises, Sarah's leadership skills were put to the test in realistic scenarios designed to simulate the stress and complexity of actual combat operations. Her ability to make quick decisions, communicate clearly under pressure, and maintain team cohesion during crisis situations impressed both her superiors and her subordinates. She had clearly internalized the lessons learned during her years of training and education. One evening during the final weeks of preparation, Sarah found herself thinking about her high school experiences and how they had shaped her character. The adversity she had faced in those locker rooms had taught her valuable lessons about resilience, self-confidence, and the importance of staying true to her values even when surrounded by hostility. Those experiences had prepared her for challenges far greater than teenage social dynamics. She thought about Jennifer Walsh and the other girls who had made her life difficult during those formative years. Sarah felt no anger or resentment toward them. Instead, she felt grateful for the inadvertent role they had played in building her mental toughness. Their attempts to break her spirit had instead strengthened her resolve and clarified her sense of purpose. Captain Rodriguez, her mentor from the reserve unit, visited Fort Campbell during the final phase of deployment preparation. He barely recognized the confident young officer who greeted him as the same uncertain teenager who had first appeared at weekend training sessions years earlier. Sarah's transformation was evident not just in her military bearing and professional competence, but in her quiet confidence and natural authority. The deployment to Afghanistan represented more than just another assignment for Sarah. It was validation of everything she had worked toward and an opportunity to test her leadership abilities under the most demanding circumstances possible. Her soldiers looked to her for guidance, protection, and inspiration, and she was determined not to let them down. As the departure date approached, Sarah received messages of support from family members, former instructors, and fellow officers who had served with her at various stages of her military career. Her parents were simultaneously proud and worried, understanding the dangers their daughter would face but confident in her preparation and abilities. The night before deployment, Sarah wrote a letter to her younger self, the frightened teenager who had endured daily humiliation while holding on to dreams that seemed impossibly distant. She wanted to tell that girl that every moment of pain and isolation had been building towards something meaningful, that the strength she was developing in those dark moments would eventually carry her through challenges she couldn't even imagine. Sarah's soldiers respected her not because of her rank or authority, but because of her competence, integrity, and genuine commitment to their welfare. She had learned that true leadership wasn't about commanding obedience, but about earning trust and inspiring others to achieve their best performance. The lessons she had absorbed about resilience, determination, and staying focused on long-term goals had shaped her into the kind of officer that soldiers wanted to follow into difficult situations. The deployment would last 12 months, during which Sarah's unit would be responsible for gathering intelligence, supporting combat operations, and training local forces. The mission required not just military skills, but cultural sensitivity, diplomatic awareness, and the ability to build relationships with people from vastly different backgrounds. Sarah's natural empathy and analytical intelligence made her well-suited for this complex role. 10 years had transformed Lieutenant Sarah Martinez into Major Sarah Martinez, a decorated combat veteran whose reputation for exceptional leadership had spread throughout the Army. Her deployment to Afghanistan had been followed by assignments in Germany, South Korea, and various installations across the United States. Each position had brought new challenges and opportunities for growth, building upon the foundation of resilience and determination that had been forged during her difficult high school years. The notification came on a Tuesday morning while Sarah was reviewing intelligence reports at her desk in the Pentagon, where she now served as a strategic analyst for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. She had been selected to return to her hometown to serve as the commanding officer of the same Army Reserve unit where she had first discovered her passion for military service. The assignment would bring her full circle, back to the community where her journey had begun under very different circumstances. Colonel Patricia Williams, Sarah's current supervisor, smiled as she delivered the news. She had watched Sarah's career with interest, noting how the young major's combination of analytical brilliance and practical leadership experience made her an ideal candidate for the challenging role of transforming a struggling reserve unit into a model of effectiveness and readiness. The Jefferson Army Reserve Center had fallen on difficult times since Captain Rodriguez's retirement 3 years earlier. Recruitment numbers were down, training standards had slipped, and morale among both soldiers and staff was at an all-time low. The Pentagon needed an officer with proven leadership abilities and deep understanding of both active duty and reserve operations to turn the situation around. Sarah's unique background made her the obvious choice for this critical assignment. Returning to her hometown after more than a decade brought a flood of memories and emotions that Sarah hadn't anticipated. The town had grown considerably during her absence, with new shopping centers, restaurants, and residential developments changing the landscape of her childhood. Jefferson High School had been renovated and expanded, but as she drove past the familiar building, Sarah could still picture herself as that lonely teenager hurrying between classes while trying to avoid her tormentors. Her first day at the Reserve Center was deliberately low-key. Sarah wanted to observe the unit's current operations, meet the personnel, and assess the challenges she would face without immediately implementing changes that might disrupt existing routines. What she found was a group of dedicated soldiers struggling with outdated equipment, insufficient training resources, and leadership that had become disconnected from the unit's mission and potential. Master Sergeant Kevin Collins, the senior enlisted advisor, had served at the center for 8 years and had watched its gradual decline with growing frustration. He was initially skeptical about another new commander, having seen several officers come and go without making significant improvements. However, Sarah's approach was different from her predecessors. Instead of immediately announcing new policies and procedures, she spent her first weeks listening to soldiers at every level, understanding their concerns, and developing a comprehensive plan for improvement. The youth mentorship program that had been so important in Sarah's own development had been discontinued due to budget constraints and lack of leadership attention. She immediately identified this as a priority for restoration, knowing firsthand how valuable the program could be for young people seeking direction and purpose. Sarah began reaching out to local schools, community organizations, and potential volunteers to rebuild the program from the ground up. 3 months into her assignment, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Jennifer Walsh, now Jennifer Walsh Peterson, appeared at the Reserve Center requesting information about the mentorship program for her teenage son, who had been struggling with direction and motivation. The irony of the situation was not lost on Sarah, though she maintained her professional composure as she explained the program's goals and requirements. Jennifer had changed significantly since high school, as had most people their age. Marriage, motherhood, and the responsibilities of adult life had given her perspective on her teenage behavior that she clearly found embarrassing. During their conversation, she made several awkward attempts to acknowledge their shared history without directly apologizing for her past actions. Sarah treated Jennifer with the same courtesy and professionalism she extended to all parents interested in the program. She explained how the mentorship initiative worked, outlined the benefits for participating youth, and provided information about enrollment procedures. Jennifer's son, Marcus, was 16 years old and struggling with the same sense of not belonging that Sarah remembered from her own teenage years. When Marcus Peterson arrived for his first weekend training session, Sarah saw something familiar in his eyes. He carried himself with the defensive posture of someone who had learned to expect rejection and ridicule from his peers. His mother had mentioned that he was intelligent and capable, but lacked confidence and direction. Sarah made a mental note to pay special attention to his development, while being careful not to show favoritism that might undermine his relationships with other program participants. The mentorship program's revival became a source of pride and renewed energy for the entire reserve unit. Experienced soldiers volunteered to serve as instructors and role models, finding renewed purpose in their service as they watched young people develop confidence, discipline, and leadership skills. The program attracted positive attention from local media and community leaders, helping to rebuild the unit's reputation and strengthen its ties to the broader community. Sarah's leadership style drew from all of her experiences, both positive and negative. She remembered how Captain Rodriguez had combined high standards with genuine care for his trainees, and she worked to create that same environment for both her soldiers and the young people in the mentorship program. She also remembered how powerless she had felt during those difficult high school years, and she was determined to ensure that no young person under her influence would face similar isolation. Marcus Peterson proved to be one of the program's most dedicated participants. His natural intelligence and growing confidence made him a leader among his peers, and Sarah watched with satisfaction as he developed the same passion for military service that had transformed her own life. Jennifer began volunteering at program events, gradually building a relationship with Sarah that transcended their complicated history. One evening, after a particularly successful training exercise, Jennifer approached Sarah privately to address their shared past directly. She spoke honestly about her teenage behavior, acknowledging the pain she had caused and expressing genuine admiration for what Sarah had accomplished, despite the adversity she had faced. Sarah accepted the apology graciously, but made it clear that she had moved beyond any resentment years earlier. The reserve unit's transformation under Sarah's leadership became a model for other struggling units throughout the region. Recruitment numbers increased dramatically as word spread about the positive changes and opportunities available at the Jefferson Center. Training scores improved significantly, and the unit earned recognition for excellence in multiple areas of evaluation. Sarah's success at the Reserve Center led to recommendations for promotion and assignment to increasingly responsible positions. She had proven that the leadership principles learned through adversity could be applied successfully in any environment. Her ability to connect with people from diverse backgrounds, inspire confidence in others, and maintain focus on long-term objectives made her exactly the kind of leader the modern military needed. As she prepared to move on to her next assignment, Sarah reflected on how her journey had come full circle. The scared teenager who had been mocked in high school locker rooms had become a respected leader, capable of inspiring and developing others who faced similar challenges. The laughter that had once echoed through those locker rooms at her expense had been replaced by the sounds of young people discovering their potential and preparing for meaningful futures in service to their country. The uniform that had once existed only in her imagination now represented years of dedicated service, combat experience, and successful leadership. More importantly, it represented the triumph of determination over discouragement, of purpose over popularity, and of long-term vision over short-term comfort. Sarah Martinez had proven that sometimes the qualities that make someone different are exactly the qualities that make them extraordinary.